Hey everybody, it's ScomletX and welcome back to some more Magic Arena, and today I'll be playing another premiere draft of Innistrad Crimson Vow. Without further ado, let's get into this draft. Not a great rare today, just a dual land, so we can scrape right on by that. We've got a Diver Scab here out of blue, great exploit card. There's a bunch of cards that synergize well with exploit, creatures that have abilities when they die, or creatures that can be recast from the graveyard. So Diver Scab ends up being pretty good, a 5 mana 3/5 that can bounce an opposing threat back into its owner's library. Very nice card if you have the expendable exploit cards, and it's not too hard to get them, so I think I'm going to go with Diver Scab here. If you want to be a super aggressive player though, Voltaic Visionary is another very strong card on kind of the opposite end of the spectrum. 2 mana for a 3/1, and you can tap it, shoot yourself in the face for 2 to exile the top card of your library and potentially play it this turn. If you do so, you flip it into a 4/3, which is nice. I guess since our last deck was kind of a slower blue deck, maybe I will actually just go for the aggressive dork. These are both the best cards though, very, very solid cards. Pretty great removal at common as well in that pack. Pack 1, pick 2, we get past a Glorious Sunrise, which is a solid sign that whoever's on our right doesn't want to draft green, because I think Glorious Sunrise is a perfectly reasonable card, probably going to be the strongest card in the pack. That being said, there's a good argument for just taking Rending Flame and sticking to mono red for now. That way we get to stick to one color with 2 very powerful cards. But I think Glorious Sunrise is probably a little bit stronger than Rending Flame in a vacuum. It's a very flexible card that can give your whole board trample every turn, or keep drawing you cards, potentially with creatures with power 3 or greater. So in a vacuum of what we've drafted so far, Glorious Sunrise I think is a perfectly reasonable pack 1, pick 1. However, could see a good argument for just taking the Rending Flame to go with the Voltaic Visionary. As I was saying before, excellent instant speed removal, keeps that path clear for your red aggressive dorks. I'm actually going to go for the Rending Flame here. That might be a little weird, but I think I talked myself out of the Glorious Sunrise when I was like, yeah, we could just be full-on red aggro right now. Pack 1, pick 3, Blood Petal Celebrant is another great aggressive red card. 2 mana for a 2/1, it has first strike while it's attacking, which means that it attacks in quite well, and whenever it does die, you get a blood token out of it, which is pretty great value. Those blood tokens go a long way, making sure that you don't hit any mana flood or mana screw. If you don't have enough mana, you can discard your weakest non-land card to try to draw into a land, and if you have too much mana, you can discard a land card to try to find a non-land. So blood tokens are nice and flexible. I enjoy them quite a bit. I'm going to go for the Blood Petal Celebrant here. There are other decent cards here, but nothing incredible. Catapult Fodder is a card that's a lot of fun in a deck with a lot of high toughness creatures. Courier Bat's pretty great for the black-white decks that can consistently life gain. But that's about it. Nothing incredible there. Pack 1, pick 4, we can take another Blood Petal Celebrant. Could also take a Belligerent Guest. We could finally move into a secondary color, taking something decent like a Point of Discussion for card draw, Cradle of Safety for protection, Drogskull Infantry for a 2-for-1 value play, a creature on turn 2, and an aura from the graveyard later. Bunch of fine cards again, but nothing incredible off color, and I do quite like Blood Petal Celebrant. Maybe that's overvaluing it a bit. Belligerent Guest is pretty great too, being able to get that blood token whenever it attacks in. It's quite nice, and with the trample, it's pretty consistent. I do already have 2 2-drops. Go 2 2-drops and a 3-drop, taking the Guest here. Guest or Celebrant, I think, are the picks. I'm going to draft like I'm drafting March in the Machine and just make sure I take the high-quality 2-mana creatures very, very highly. That's something I've been noticing in a lot of recent sets, is that it's pretty important to get all of your high-quality 2-mana creatures early, because there's just a lot more options at 3 mana, 4 mana, 5 mana, and a lot less room in your decks for those higher mana costs. Pack 1, pick 5 is a really weak pack overall. My favorite card here by a lot is Scattered Thoughts. Just a very good card draw spell, digging 4 cards deep, being an instant speed spell as well, so you can hold up removal like Rending Flame if you need to use it, and then cast your card draw if you don't. So I'm going to take Scattered Thoughts here, but outside of that, I think everything in this pack's pretty bad. I'm not a very big fan of Daybreak Combatants, just for the low toughness for the cost. Heron Blessed Geist is pretty slow, Binding Geist is pretty slow, everything else in there is pretty slow in general. Well, it's a pick 6 Markov Waltzer, which is quite a good sign for red-white aggro. There's also Fierce Retribution still in the pack, which is generally a good sign for white, as one of white's best common removal spells. There's also Drogskull Infantry still in here, which is one of white's best 2-mana creatures. A lot of really good stuff happening in this pack in white, so we can take Markov Waltzer and try to push into white as our secondary color. And that's a pick 7 Traveling Minister, so white does look quite open. Traveling Minister, I think, is one of the best commons in the whole format, making you be able to get into combat a lot easier, having 3 power creatures buffing up to 4 power to be able to attack into 2/4s and 4/4s and everything like that. Just gets a lot of extra damage through that you wouldn't have been able to get in otherwise. Really helps you get into positions where it's very hard to be walled off by your opponent's defenses. Pack 1, pick 8 now. These blue cards aren't particularly good. The red card is quite bad though, as is the white card. So I'll just take a Flourishing Hunter. It's just the strongest card in the pack, not particularly likely to get played, but everything else in this pack is pretty much a 0% chance. So I'll take that Flourishing Hunter. We're 1 card deep into green and blue now. Lacerate Flesh is really not where you want to be for removal, but it can make the cut if you're too low on removal spells and you just need to get your 3rd or 4th removal spell in there. That being said, we already have 1 very good removal spell. It's the only removal spell we have so far, but hopefully we can keep up with that level of quality and just take a Speculative Spore Crawler here as the best card individually out of the pack. And now we're 2 cards deep into green. If we open up like a Helena and Elena, some kind of really good red-green rare, we could still go in the green-red direction, and seeing a Flourishing Hunter into a Spore Crawler those last 2 picks means that green is also decently open, just like white looked decently open earlier. And I'm going to go for a Massive Might here again to have that nice green backup plan. And this pack's pretty bad. I'll take a Toxic Scorpion. Wouldn't be excited about playing it in a green deck, but it'd be possible. Just going to rare draft Archghoul of Thraben as the highest rarity card. I'm not going to play Honeymoon Hearse, and let's see what we open up in pack 2. Alright, well, we opened up an on-color rare, but unfortunately it kind of sucks. The +1/+1 counter mechanics in this set are very inconsistent and few and far between, so it's pretty hard to get this card going, and even if you do get it going, if you have a creature with a +1/+1 counter on the board, you have to treat this as kind of like a 6-mana aura that gave 1 of your creatures flying, or maybe 2 of your creatures flying and a bit of a buff. Can be explosive if you're really lucky, but super hard to get it to work. I'm not a big fan of it. That being said, green cards here are pretty bad. Sporeback Wolf is fine. Snarling Wolf is fine. Red cards here aren't great. Fearful Villager and Sure Strike. I guess I have some humans in here. I have a Voltaic Visionary and a Traveling Minister, so Resistance Squad could pan out well. If you get to the Enter the Battlefield effect on this card, it's great. A 3-mana 3/2 that draws a card to replaces itself in the card economy. But if you don't get that Enter the Battlefield effect, then a 3-mana 3/2 with no text is pretty bad, so we'll have to draft some humans pretty highly, but there's a lot of humans in white and a few in red, so we can probably get there. Speaking of humans, we're going to go ahead and take another Traveling Minister now. Excellent, excellent card for pretty much any deck. Ideally more aggressive ones like this, so we're super happy with Traveling Minister. Nurturing Presence is a deceptively good card as well. 2 mana for a 1/1 flyer, but you also get a bunch of extra damage in, thanks to the aura half of this card. My favorite cards in this pack are the black commons here. Actually, Traveling Minister is pretty tied with them, but I do think that Diregraph Scavenger, very good for some graveyard hate, as well as a Death Toucher that trades into anything later. Bloodcrazed Socialite is very good just because it hits like a truck. This thing's a 5/5 menace if you sack a blood token when it attacks. So those black commons were pretty great there. Just a very good finisher and a really nice exile card. Alright, pack 2, pick 3. Nothing super exciting. We'll take a Voldaren Epicure here. We are pretty committed to our Boros deck here. I could take a Brinecomer, seeing as it is the strongest card in the pack. This is quite good for the blue-white Disturb archetype, because blue and white both have a lot of cards with that Disturb mechanic, which means that they're creatures that when they die can be recast as auras from the grave. So if you have a Brinecomer on the board, or if you put a Brinebound Gift onto something, then every time you disturb something from your grave, you're also getting a 1/1 Flying Spirit, which is pretty nice. It's a really good card for that archetype, but I don't think we're going to get pushed off of red and onto blue. That feels quite unlikely. I'm going to go ahead and take our next great removal spell. We'll take a Fierce Retribution here. Panicked Bystander is a pretty dang good 2-drop, but luckily we took them pretty highly in pack 1 to where we already have 3 2-mana creatures, which is a decent spot to be, pack 2, pick 4, so we have time to take more removal spells over solid 2-drops like the Bystander. So we'll take a Fierce Retribution, get our second great removal spell into this deck. Alright, pack 2, pick 5, I guess we've got that opportunity to take the Panicked Bystander now. I think I prefer it to Nurturing Presence in this deck. I did just say that this is much better than it looks, but I think that the Panicked Bystander might be a little bit better in this deck because we have 2 Traveling Ministers to potentially get enough life gain to flip this. It's not going to happen super frequently, but every now and then it might, which would be pretty good. A 2-mana 3/5 is absurd. And not only that, but this is going to up our human count for Resistance Squad to draw cards more consistently, whereas the Nurturing Presence is not going to add to our human count. Pack 2, pick 6, very big fan of Falcon Wrath Celebrants. 5 mana 4/4 Menace is a solid finisher, and it gives you 2 blood tokens as well to filter out of any mana flood you might be experiencing late in the game. So we'll take a Falcon Wrath Celebrants here. And it's a little awkward for us. Obviously, blue-white is looking pretty open here, but it's impossible to foresee that the draft pod is just going to open 3 of the blue-white Signpost Uncommon in a single pack. Like, there's been 3 Brinecombers in our pack 2, which is not a super likely occurrence, so it feels rough to get that punished for not jumping on the blue-white train, but it is what it is. That's a pick 7 Lantern Bearer as well, but it's also a pick 7 Falcon Wrath Celebrants. Very strong cards going late in the draft pod in multiple colors. Alright, now it's just blue stuff that's good, Syncopate and Geistlight Snare. We can take Ancestral Anger. If you get multiple copies, this plays decently well in any aggressive deck. At its absolute best in the blue-red deck, though, because you get a lot of value just from casting sorceries. Pick 9 Brinecomer. I guess I'll take a pick 9 Brinecomer. If I wheel the other Brinecomer as well, I think I'm still not going to be on blue-white, but I'm not going to play a Militia Rallier here, and that's the only on-color card. So, wow, Gluttonous Guest and Bloodcrazed Socialite pick 10. Those are both also excellent cards. Yeah, this is probably just a draft pod of a lot of players that are a little newer to the format and just value different cards more highly than I do, and different cards less highly, where there's a lot of cards in pretty much every color but green going really late that I think are actually just really high quality cards. Like, Grizzly Ritual is not a super high quality card, but pick 12 is quite late for that in my opinion, and pick 13 for Nurturing Presence is something I'm very happy to see. Alright, pack 3, pick 1. Unfortunately, we did not open up any on-color rares this draft. Pretty sad. We've got a Belligerent Guest here, though, which is pretty solid. We could also take Adamant Will for a combat trick. I think I'd rather get a 3-drop creature. If we look at our mana curve, we're sitting on 1 Resistance Squad, and that's it at 3 mana, which is not fantastic. I'd like to up that count. And there's another Markov Waltzer. Happy to see that. That's going to make this deck a lot better. This card is super powerful, super flexible. Really good at getting damage in the sky. Whew, if we were in blue, another blue rare here, Overcharged Amalgam, was opened up. Now there is a Heron of Hope for another great flyer. This also synergizes quite well with our Panicked Bystander and our 2 Traveling Ministers. Ministers will start gaining us 2 life every turn, and the Panicked Bystander will much more easily be able to flip into the 3/5 Cackling Culprit. Pack 3, pick 4. Not a massive fan of Hungry Ridgewolf unless you're in red-green, or Nebelgast Beguiler just in general. We could take a second Ancestral Anger. They do get better the more copies we have, and we're low enough on playables right now at 18 cards that we are probably going to have to run Ancestral Anger, so let's make sure it's actually a reasonable card instead of just having 1 copy. Let's go for the double up there. Maybe get the triple up if this copy wheels, because there is no way I'm passing an Alluring Suitor. This is a phenomenal 3-mana creature, and we're very low on those. 3 mana for a 2/3, but if you attack with exactly 2 creatures, then this gets to transform into a 3/3 trample that gives you 2 mana the second it transforms, and has a fire-breathing ability to add 1 to the power of itself and another creature you control. So really, really strong when you flip that. Big fan of Alluring Suitor. Now we're going to have something quite filler like an Unholy Efficient or a Runebound Wolf without any other wolves or werewolves, or a Lightning Wolf. Really not a big fan of any of these. Weary Prisoner is particularly bad because that Defender, you just really don't care about that half. I'll just take a Lightning Wolf, but that'll be one of the first cards we cut if we can. Now we have a Fleeting Spirit for a really good 2-drop versus Markov Waltzer for a really good 4-drop. I'm just going to go for the triple stack here. The full trio of Markov Waltzers. All the Signpost uncommons. So while if we were blue-white, we could have had 3 Brinecombers, it looks like in red-white, we can also have 3 Markov Waltzers. So we still get 3 of the Signpost uncommon for our color pair. Now, if we were in blue-white, though, we'd also have as many Syncopates as we wanted, and that Overcharged Amalgam rare. So we'd have some sweet stuff going on, and probably be a bit stronger, but I think we're in a pretty solid place in red-white here. I don't think I'll be playing this Radiant Grace, but I need to pick more cards that are on color, so I have at least a couple options when we get to deck building. That's a pick 11 Bloodcrazed Socialite, pick 11 Chill of the Grave, very solid blue card, very solid black card. Again, really just feels like a lot of great cards going late. Scattered Thoughts now, Reckless Impulse even's pretty good. We might actually play Reckless Impulse here. Again, because I need 22nd, 23rd playables. No respect for Scattered Thoughts in this draft spot. You want to see how solid that card is? Check out my last Innistrad Crimson Vow draft. I think that was the one where I was blue-white and we ran a couple copies of Scattered Thoughts with a couple counter spells like Syncopate. And plays really, really well when you've got a couple instant speed things to do like that. So this will be a really easy deck build today, seeing as we have 42 cards. Let's see our creature count. We want that to be 15 to 17. 17 seems perfect for us here, so let's just cut the 2 worst non-creature cards. I suppose one of our non-creature cards is Nurturing Presence, which plays just like a creature. So we can cut 1 Radiant Grace and 1 creature. And the creature I'm going to cut is the Lightning Wolf, I already said. This is the weakest creature in our deck. This will be the first cut, so there we go. Cut that one. And Radiant Grace, I think, is the worst non-creature card in our deck. When you've got 3 Ancestral Angers, that's where it actually starts to play pretty decently. It's not going to be incredible in this deck. It doesn't become incredible unless you're the deck with a lot of cards that trigger every time you cast an instant or sorcery, but it should be fine here for helping us get some extra damage in. And it draws you a card every time you cast one, so it always replaces itself, which is nice. And then Reckless Impulse is very solid card draw. Rending Flame and Fierce Retribution are great removal spells, and Nurturing Presence is quite a solid creature, so I think all of our other non-creatures are better than the Radiant Grace. +1/+0 and Vigilance is a very minor buff to spend a whole card to do that. Technically, you're not spending a whole card to do that, you're spending a whole card to give something +1/+0 and Vigilance for a little while, and then make your opponent's creatures hit the board tapped, but both of those effects are minor enough that stacking both of them together still doesn't feel quite worth a full card of value, so not a big fan of Radiant Grace, and we'll cut that as the final card, and we'll double check our mana base. We have 16 red cards, 10 white cards, so it looks like a 9-8 split is correct, but let's double check and make sure we don't have any double red or double whites. And we don't. Every single card in our deck only requires 1 mana of its respective color, so we don't have to worry about consistently hitting double white or something like that. Did want to double check that because the last March of the Machine draft that I played, I had an issue where I had like 18 white cards and then only like 5, 6 black cards, something like that. But my black cards all needed 2 black mana, like double black and 1 or double black and 2. So I just kind of instinctually was like, yeah, let's run like 2 more Plains Than Swamps or something like that. But it wasn't really a mana base where I should have done that because I needed to not only look at the quantity of cards in each color, but you do want to check out your color restrictions as well. And so Just wanted to make sure to not forget that today, and our color restrictions are nice and easy, so a pretty even split with a slight lean towards red sources seems correct for this deck, so we'll call it a deck there. Alright, here's a look at today's deck list. It's going to be another red-white aggro deck here with a really nice curve of creatures. We've got double Traveling Ministers starting things off. These are going to help assist our larger creatures at getting through our opponent's board state and chipping in for some extra damage. Voldaren Epicure is a pretty flexible card, giving us that blood token to get out of any mana flood late game. We have Panicked Bystander, double Blood Petal Celebrant, and a Voltaic Visionary on 2. All of those pretty nice little aggro dorks. The Visionary can draw us an extra card, the Blood Petal Celebrants can give us a blood token for later in the game, and the Panicked Bystander can give us a little bit of extra life gain and potentially flip every now and then if we have some of our other life gain going on alongside it. 3 mana, we have Resistance Squad with a decent amount of humans, not a ton of them, so it's not going to draw a card super consistently, but when it does, it'll be a great card. We've got Belligerent Guest fueling us with more blood tokens, and Alluring Suitor being a very deadly card. The Deadly Dancer, very strong when it flips, and it gives us a little bit of extra mana, which we can use to just dump our hand out more quickly, or we can use to dump some extra damage onto the board with the 2 red mana ability. 4 mana, we have 4 flyers, Heron of Hope, and triple Markov Waltzer. 3 of the Signpost uncommon for this archetype, just a great aggressive body that gets flexible with where it is dealing the extra damage. And then we have 2 Falconwrath Celebrants at the top end of the curve, being some pretty large finishers that also fuel us with those blood tokens. So again, pretty hard for us to flood out with this deck with a lot of blood tokens to discard any lands that we draw past our 5th or 6th. So a lot of great blood token production in this deck, a lot of great ways to keep drawing gas late in the game rather than drawing a bunch of extra lands. A little bit low on removal with just a Rending Flame and a Fierce Retribution, but we have a few great evasive threats like these 4 mana cards. We have a bunch of these little trample cantrips to just try to trample over our opponent's board state. And we have some other like menacing style threats to get through, so it's like a pretty solid deck overall. Very excited to see how it does as we head into the gameplay. Here we are on the play for game 1. I am going to keep this hand, not particularly happy about it though, with no play until turn 3. We have both of our colors though. We've got a removal spell, we've got one of our best 3-drops, but we really need to draw some more creatures, ideally cheap creatures, to go with the Alluring Suitor. Luckily enough, we do hit a 2 mana play, which is an excellent start to our draws here. That way we do actually get started on turn 2, so we can play something on turn 2, turn 3, and then turn 5. Our opponent's going to drop a Ceremonial Knife on board, which can fuel them with a bunch of blood tokens as they deal damage. Send in the Blood Petal Celebrant for 2, and drop an Alluring Suitor. And we could just play a Falconwrath Celebrants early thanks to the Alluring Suitor's extra 2 mana next turn, if they don't play any removal for one of these cards. There's a Gluttonous Guest from our opponent, which means if I want to attack in with both creatures, to flip Alluring Suitor, I have to let Blood Petal Celebrant die, or I have to Rending Flame the Gluttonous Guest. I don't really want to do either of those, so I'm not sure what the play is here. It might be worth it to get the Celebrants out early, to sack the Celebrant here. The Blood Petal Celebrant to get the Falconwrath Celebrants. I guess I should specify, because they're both called Celebrants. Yeah, I mean, if I Rending Flame the Gluttonous Guest, sure I can flip the Alluring Suitor, but then I don't have the mana to cast the Celebrants anyway. The 5 mana Celebrants. I could cycle an Ancestral Anger and hope for the best. I don't even know what I'm hoping to draw there. Sure, I mean, next turn I'll have the 5 mana to just play a Celebrants, so let's cycle an Ancestral Anger, see what we draw, and let's just Flame the Guest and get in for a bunch of damage here. And that puts them down to 10, and we follow up with a 4/4 Menace next turn. There's a Fearful Villager. My Blood Petal Celebrant can't attack into that, but the Deadly Dancer certainly can. And they only have 1 red mana up now. They could have a Flame Blessed Bolt, but that only does 2 damage to one of our creatures, so we should be fine. Yeah, and they're going to crack a Blood Token, discard a Hearse, draw a card. So let's... I guess with the first strike from the Blood Petal Celebrant, if they block here, we could just spend double red and kill the Villager. I would rather just play a Menace card, but I think I'm going to play Mountain and attack first. I guess I could put them down to 1 life if they don't block, and if they do block, I just first strike kill the Villager, or I trample over the Villager. But obviously I don't get to play another creature here by doing this, which isn't wonderful, but I think it's perfectly worth it here. They're down to 5 life now. Daybreak Combatants is just a 2/2 on the defensive, part of why the card plays pretty poorly. And they are super dead on board, so they're going to scoop them up, and we'll start things off 1-0 heading into game 2. Here we are for game 2. We are going to be on the draw here, but we've got a pretty great hand with Blood Petal Celebrant into Alluring Suitor. We can wait on the Resistance Squad until we potentially draw a human. If I cast all these spells and I still haven't drawn a human by then I guess we can just run it out. We have plenty of stuff to play before the Resistance Squad. Playing against a 3-color Kessig Flamebreather deck. Kessig Flamebreather shoots us in the face for 1 whenever our opponent casts an instant or sorcery, and they're casting Vampire's Kiss, so they could be like a dedicated burn deck here, which would be pretty cute. Pretty fun. Where they could be playing a bunch of Vampire's Kiss style cards that no one else in the draft pod's really interested in. But if you have a bunch of Kessig Flamebreathers, you can just go full out, all in on burn. You get to use the blood tokens to discard any lands, trying to draw more burn spells like Vampire's Kiss. Could be fun stuff. So here's a Markov Waltzer for them to get some damage in the sky. Sending the Flamebreather on the ground for fun, I guess. We'll block it. And that means we are free to get all the damage we want in this turn. Can only attack with 2 creatures here. I need to attack with exactly 2 to flip the Suitor, and I would like to do that, so I think we might as well attack with 2 creatures and drop a Falconwrath Celebrant off of the mana discount. So let's cycle in Ancestral Anger as well for the extra point of damage. Even though it could help a Celebrant attack into a Flame Breather, I think it's better to get that mana investment for the damage output out of the way. Because we have so much going on in our hand, we're probably going to be using all of our mana on just casting more dorks in the future. Because if I don't draw land, I'm going to play a 4-mana creature. If I do draw land, I'm going to play a 5-mana creature. Unlikely to hold up 1 mana for an Ancestral Anger for quite some time. And unfortunately, our opponent has a phenomenal bomb rare here. Edgar Charmed Broom. Charmed Broom. Perfect. Sweeps everything up. Gives all the vampires +1/+1. When he dies, turns into the Coffin that spits out a bunch of 1/1s with lifelink. Just a pretty absurd magic card. Where the best out to that is to exile it. And we don't have any exile removal in our deck, so we need to outrace it somehow. So let's probably drop Markov Waltzer, send in the Waltzer and the Deadly Dancer, I guess, because Celebrants is just going to get double blocked by Edgar and Flame Breather. Dancer will as well, but I think I would rather hold on to Celebrants than the Dancer. And this is still really bad for me if they just trade Edgar off and start getting lifelinking vampires on the ground, but I guess I can block them, I just can't attack into them super well. Yep, trade Edgar off. This is the exact same outcome as if I buffed the Celebrants and attacked with that. I feel like Menace would probably be marginally better than the Trample. There's Cigar's Imprisonment for our Markov Waltzer. We have nothing going on in the sky anymore. Discard a Blood Servitor to draw a card. There's a Fierce Retribution for the Markov Waltzer. Drop a Nurturing Presence on the Blood Petal Celebrant then, so it can attack into the Flame Breather here. I guess it already could because Markov Waltzer still has its ability. But I want to hold up the 2 mana for Fierce Retribution, so we just play a 2 mana card here. Interesting, I guess I'll first strike kill both of those. Boop boop. And we'll hit for 5. Ready to Fierce Retribution. I'm pretty okay with using this on Markov Waltzer because it's not even that good on Edgar Markov, because they'll just get the coffin again. Alright, so there's Kindly Ancestor, a lifelinker. I'm not into that, but even if I kill Kindly Ancestor, they can put lifelink onto something else with Ancestor's Embrace. So again, their best target for removal on board is Fierce Retribution, so if they attack, I'm going to take that opportunity. If they don't, then I think we're going to use some blood tokens. Discard a Resistance Squad, because we don't have any humans right now anyway. So it's just a 3 mana 3/2, which Belligerent Guest is just better than that in a lot of ways right now. Find a Reckless Impulse. Kind of like that, but I really want a 5th land more than anything. That would be nice for later. I don't know how much later we're going to have here. 9 life to 9 life. They have tons of lifelink on their board now. Yeah, I don't know how much later we're going to have. Let's discard the Reckless Impulse and just try to help guarantee land 5. There is land 5. And a Voldaren Epicure as well. So I can cast Falconwrath Celebrants, which makes the Blood Petal Celebrant 3 power first strike. We can make it 4 power first strike off Markov Waltzer and make the Falconwrath Celebrants a 5 power menace card. Seems perfectly strong to me. It could double block the Blood Petal Celebrant. Actually, they'd have to triple block Blood Petal Celebrant to kill it. They double block with the 1/3 and the 2/3. We just first strike the 2/3 and Blood Petal Celebrant survives. I only kill one of their blockers, but I don't lose the Blood Petal Celebrant. The first strike is playing so hot with these Blood Petal Celebrants. They're going to do some shenanigans here to kill the Blood Petal Celebrants, but we'll see. Maybe they just want to gain all the life. And then Ancestors Embrace their Waltzer. So they do gain a lot of life, and they have a lifelink aura in their graveyard. Flip the Charmed Groom. Now their vampires are +1/+1. Oh my god, and Edgar doesn't have Summoning Sickness because it was technically on the board the whole time. Possible they could just find lethal here with 2 removal spells, we're dead. I guess 2 removal spells we take 8 damage, we'd go to 1 life. Okay, they're just going to exile our Markov Waltzer entirely so that we can't buff our board anymore. Come on, land off the top for Fierce Retribution. No land off the top for Fierce Retribution, but another Markov Waltzer is pretty good here. I feel like we probably can reasonably find lethal here. Because Waltzer has haste, Epicure deals the damage the second it hits the board. Math is kind of for blockers. So I think I'm going to send in everybody, right? They gain 2 life. They're essentially at 9 with 3 blockers up. This is probably killing them. 2 4-power menace creatures. Definitely killing them if they block our lifelinker with or our first striker with their lifelinker. Does that put them to -1? I don't think they could have survived. Actually, if they blocked our first striker with their Markov Waltzer and then put Edgar Markov and the lifelinker on a 4/4, then Celebrant kills Waltzer. The other Celebrants trades into Edgar and a lifelinker. And they take 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Like they did now, except they also gain 2. So they'd be at 1 life, but they would basically still just die in another attack. So I guess they could have like barely survived, but I don't think it would have mattered there. All right, well, that worked a lot better than I thought it would. We just got a lot of really good work done with our first striker there, making their blocks relatively rough for them. Definitely worried that Edgar Markov could just absolutely take over the board state with some good combats for them, but they could not find the good blocks, the good combats to swing things around. Our opponent's on the play. This is a hand that doesn't start till turn 3 on the draw, which is very slow. But I'm gonna keep it anyway, because the colors are great and the high-end cards are very powerful. Luckily, our opponent isn't doing anything turn 1 or turn 2, so we're not going to get punished too hard so far for our slower keep. There's a Blood Hypnotist. That cannot block. We are going to be 2 ships passing in the night. Not even going to look at our opponent. Flame Blast Bolt for the Belligerent Guest. That is horrible for me. 1 mana to blow up my 3 mana card. They just got a huge mana advantage on us there. Drawing all 3 Ancestral Angers. It's very funny, but not very powerful. Now they have a Sharpshooter to go with this Blood Hypnotist, so this is going to train all the way up to a 3/7 body over time. This is not looking great. Not how we wanted the game to develop for us right now. Five mana. I'll go Waltzer and Anger here. They're just holding 5 mana up. What is going on? Maybe they're flooded out. Maybe it's a bunch of instant speed removal. I don't really have the mana to try to gain some life with Heron of Hope, but it's not going to do anything on blocks. At least Celebrants gets to block their 3/3. I'll go Celebrants. Heron of Hope is not going to be blocking, so send it in. There's a Spore Crawler now. And no attacks. Let's go Falcon Wrath Celebrants, helping us stabilize quite a bit. Two Ancestral Angers is going to give the Heron of Hope +3 power for the turn. Big enough to attack into the Sharpshooter. Do that first and see if we draw into anything better to do than Markov Waltzer, but we might just also Markov Waltzer and buff the Heron of Hope again. Blood Petal Celebrant. I could play a Blood Petal Celebrant and use a couple blood tokens, or just play a Celebrant and gain 6 life. I'm actually pretty happy to do that, I think. Let's gain the life here. Should be super hard for our opponent to race this now. The huge life point swings that come from a life-linking Heron of Hope, especially when it's buffed up. Cloaked Cadet, really strong card with training abilities. Every time a human they control gets a counter on it, they draw a card, so we need to kill any humans that have the training mechanic that get +1/+1 counters. So we'll kill the sharpshooter on this attack, unless they have another Flame Blast Bolt, then they could save it there. They could also use the Flame Blast Bolt post-combat instead to kill Celebrants rather than save the creature, but looks like they don't have the bolt. No reach creature anymore, which means Heron of Hope has just free reign. We'd probably drop Waltzer and just start using a bunch of blood tokens then. I think I'm cool to gain some life and just use one blood token this turn. And we're fully racing our opponent now that we have the lifelink going. We're just going to let them attack with everybody. I guess letting them attack with Cloaked Cadet gives them another card draw, but just go full race, let them have their cards. Because they can't block any of this. I could have put them to 1 right now, but not 0, so I think it's better to just use the blood token and try to Ancestral Anger for the kill next turn. We're at 19 life. They kind of have to just kill us now, or they're going to die next turn. They would need to play quite a few blockers and or removal spells. I guess technically they just need 2 ways to stop a flyer, so 1 removal spell on a reach creature, 1 removal spell on a flyer, 2 flyers, any combination of that would work. Because they don't have to attack with Cloaked Cadet and Spore Crawler, and if they don't, then they'll have the blocker for Falconwrath Celebrants. Because they can double block the Menace creature. So there's the removal spell, Wolf Strike. That's one of the 2 cards they need. Second card needs to be another way to deal with a flyer. Another removal spell. Or a reach creature or a flyer of their own. Send in the Cloaked Cadet. And the Blood Hypnotist to draw a card and look for the next removal spell. I'd be surprised if Blood Hypnotist doesn't attack, because it can't block anyway. And we don't have our 4/4 untapped anymore to kill it. Alright, just the Blood Hypnotist. So we take the 3 back down to 16. And they're just going to pass turn, probably holding up instant speed removal. Draw the card, hit Voldaren Epicure. So now I can Ancestral Anger the Celebrants, puts it to 7 power against 6 toughness. Well, no, it's probably better to just Anger the Heron of Hope and hope that it's not a removal spell from them. Because I'll have the 6 mana up to Fierce Retribution as well. So I can go Anger on the Heron of Hope. If they removal spell it, then I can Fierce Retribution one of the 2 blockers and get the Menace creature in. Yeah, and if they don't removal spell, then I can just attack both. Looks like they don't have a removal spell there. I think it would probably still be right to just Retribution pre-combat to kill one of the 2 blockers. That's 2 unblockable creatures with 4 or more power attacking them. Just make it very, very likely that they die there. Because they could always have an instant speed removal spell and just wait until we've already declared all our attackers. That way they get the double block on the Menace creature and then they kill the flyer before combat damage resolves. So yeah, we were going to have to just main phase a Fierce Retribution. Luckily for us though, opponent just scoops them up so we don't have to go through the final motions. And we're now going to be 3-0. Always an excellent place to start a Premier Draft, getting at least 1,000 gems back. Alright, here we are on the play for Game 4. And my leg is asleep. And it is all fuzzy needles and terribly uncomfortable feelings. And monkey brain cannot think right now. Ceremonial Knife turn 1 from our opponent means that they are not going to be playing a creature. Turn 1, which is nice. Nurturing Presence on Traveling Minister is so awkward because I don't really want to attack with Traveling Minister, but in the interest of curving out, it's probably the play. Get our 1/1 flyer on the board. Second mana for our opponent, they drop a Wretched Throng. Rending Flame is probably going to be pretty decent in this matchup. Yeah, we're kind of just playing this Nurturing Presence as a 1/1 flyer. That's not beautiful. Because, like, I'm not going to attack in with the Traveling Minister this turn, even though I am going to play a creature this turn, so just no value from the Nurturing Presence trigger. Maybe it would have been best to just be patient and just kind of sit on it for now. Do need a 4th land pretty badly. I don't know if it's badly enough to blood token away the Ancestral Anger when I can just cycle the Ancestral Anger and get an extra point of damage next turn. Although if I do that, I'm not playing a Markov Waltzer, which is significantly worse. I think we need to just shore up the odds of playing Markov Waltzer turn 4 by just cycling the Ancestral Anger. Maybe it would have been better to just play the Ancestral Anger last turn on the Spirit rather than the Epic here. All things considered, that was probably the line. Reckless Impulse, oof. Well, see if Impulse can find the 4th land. Oh my god, that's bad. Yeah, that's horrendous. Well, is what it is. Send in the squad for 3 damage thanks to Traveling Minister. We get our Epic here to trade up into the Stitched Assistant. Happy to see it. Happy to see it. Our opponent is on blue-black. I haven't mentioned it because I could not understand what their lands were for a little while. I'm still trying to comprehend the feeling in my leg. Oh, thank goodness. Alright, so we don't get to keep this Ancestral Anger, but that's fine. We get to at least get the Markov Waltzer to resolve. I am giving them a turn of Whispering Wizard, which isn't great. Like, Rending Flame on Whispering Wizard would be the play if we didn't have cards that were about to get permanently exiled here. But I think that's fine. I'm actually going to offer the trade into the Whispering Wizard because I think getting the Whispering Wizard off the board is pretty important. They can get a potential 1/1 flyer every single turn that they cast a non-creature spell. Send in the Whispering Wizard, that is bold. Drop a Wretched Throng. Alright, Mind. What was that about? Let's drop another Markov Waltzer and just try to lethal. Probably a counterspell here or something. They get a 1/1 flyer and they stop the Markov Waltzer. Yep. Sure. It's pretty dang good for our opponent. I couldn't have done anything this turn, even if I Rending Flamed, they had the mana up to syncopate that. Because it was counter unless I pay 3, I think? Because they just played a Throng. It's counter unless I pay 2. I guess I could have afforded a Rending Flame if I played around exactly syncopate. They're down to 5. I can Rending Flame a Spirit, which does 2 damage to them and clears out a Spirit. That can find an extra 2 damage out of nowhere to them. They might not be expecting, which could be big. Three Weird Sisters. Post-combat is interesting, because they have a triggered ability at the beginning of combat on their turn they get to choose from. They just go for the post-combat. Opponent is at 5 life. I don't have the mana to play Waltzer and Rending Flame. Kind of feel like I want to flame the 3 Weird Sisters now. If they have nothing, I could Rending Flame the Spirit, which shoots them down to 2... Well, it shoots them for 2, which puts them down to 3. Then I can have Markov Waltzer attack in for 3 power, forcing them to chump with the 3 Weird Sisters and get both of the flyers out of the way. I'm going to test the waters a little bit here. Full control, go to the start of combat. Or I guess this tests the waters and sees if they have any interaction for now. Okay, that was a no. But it could be a counter spell that they can't... They're not going to get priority for until I try to cast Rending Flame. This could blow up in my face, but I don't think that just killing the 3 Weird Sisters or killing Whispering Wizard is going to get me there. If I kill the 3 Weird Sisters, then they're going to still have Wizard and keep getting Spirits. If I kill the Wizard, they're still going to have Sisters, they're going to get a big life-linking blocker. Maybe I just play multiple 3-power attackers? 2 Waltzer triggers means I can have all 3 of these be 3 power, I think. Okay. I don't know. There's a lot of lines here. A lot of options. Oh, I guess they're not all 3 power. This was probably not it. I think it was probably Rending Flame something. Because here, if I send in this Waltzer, they just go block, block, take 3. Then they're going to flip that into a lifelinker and go to town. Unless they hold it up as a blocker, then they might die. Cradle of Safety means no matter what line I take, I'm losing this game. God dang it. If I went for any Rending Flame line, it gets Cradle of Safety, and they get another blocker. And the attack line gets Cradle of Safety. Oh, I could have killed that Spirit, but... The auto damager might have been doing me a solid there. Never mind. Alright, if I fully thought that out, instead of just like insta-clicking to where it just dealt all the damage to the 3 Weird Sisters and killed nothing, I probably would have still come to the same conclusion of I should probably leave the Spirit on the board, because without that on the board I don't have a way to shoot them in the face for 2. But if I leave them the Spirit token, then I potentially shoot that. That puts them to 1. So I just need to be able to somehow chip in for 1 damage at some point, if they don't start attacking me with the lifelinker. So it was just a misclick of why the Spirit is still around, but I think that was actually the right play. Doesn't matter though, because they got the 3 Weird Sisters on board, and I couldn't kill it because Cradle of Safety, no matter what I did. Game's over. Here we are now for game 5. Super keepable hand, we'll roll with it. I'm still so disappointed with that last game. I think I played last game correctly all up until the last turn, where it literally didn't matter because the best line that we possibly have just gets destroyed by that Cradle of Safety that they had. I feel like I did everything I could there, but missing that 4th land drop after digging so far for it completely cost us the game. We could have killed them turns ago. Had the mana up for the removal for their great creatures in the end. Was so disappointing. Alright, let's see if we can draw into our land number 3. We do draw into land 3, which is great. Also, this Traveling Minister means we will have a human on board for the Markov, or the Resistance Squad, not the Markov Waltzer. That's some more good value. Our opponent's on blue-green. Storm Tracer Drake to start it off, so they're probably playing a lot of combat tricks to draw cards off of the Drake's ability. And they're just getting aggressive here because they don't want to lose the Drake in combat. They want to keep it around to draw all the cards. So, could just slam down the Markov Waltzer for all the mana in the world, or I could go Resistance Squad Ancestral Anger. They might just be holding up a Syncopate here. If they're doing that, they're still going to take 4 and go to 10, which is fine. I think I'm good to just go for the Waltzer. If it gets Syncopated, it gets Syncopated. Okay. Combat. Spread out our damage wide here. So they can't just like throw a bounce spell at our 1/4 power creature or something like that. Wolf Strike, yeah. Wolf Strike's very good with Storm Chaser Drake. It's a removal spell plus draw a card. Kind of absurd. Down to 17. Weaver of Blossoms is the play. A single blue mana up means not a lot they could have here. Let's draw a Resistance Squad card. Get some Ancestral Anger damage in, and then filter a blood token out. Let's anger up the Epicure so it's big enough to attack into the Weaver. And then since it has Trample, that will be our creature that we target with Markov Waltzer as well. Alright, trample over for 1, and hit for 3 in the sky. They are down to 6. We have 2 blood tokens out and a Reckless Impulse, so we've got all the card draw to find some more action to help try to close out the game. Those last few points of life. Search the Count's Castle. Our opponent's digging for some answers here. They draw 3, then discard a basic land. Pretty great instant speed card draw spell. They're going to go for a Toxic Scorpion. They have 2 blockers total. Okay, draw another land. I forgot to use my blood token, which was loose. We hit Falconwrath Celebrant's Belligerent Guest, which means we play a Guest this turn and crack a blood token this turn. I think I actually spread out and attack with the Traveling Minister as well this turn. Because that actually gets more damage in this way, I believe. Okay, they're going to trade into the Minister, take 2, and trade into the squad. Fair enough. And then we cycle a blood. Vile Spawn Spider. We need to kill them in like 1 turn, or that's going to give them a million 1/1 blockers. Need to draw some gas. We hit land, Voltaic Visionary. That is not my definition of gas. What do we have next? Another land. Well, Vile Spawn Spider is going to spit out a ton of blockers. At least the Guest tramples over for 1 damage here. So Falconwrath Celebrants. Spore Crawler from our opponent, and Lantern Bearer. They do not have the 4 mana up to make a bunch of 1/1s now. Can't do it this turn. Cycle a blood token. Get another Markov Waltzer, that's pretty great. I think we will be playing that here. We can have both of the Waltzers become 3/3 flyers. They could double block and kill one with Vile Spawn plus Lantern Bearer. But then they don't have Vile Spawn Spider anymore on the ground. If I just attack with everybody making both Waltzers 3/3s, they're dead, right? Because they need to block all the Waltzers and the Celebrants. And the Celebrants has Menace, which means they can't block both of those and the Celebrants. They can only block 2 creatures here. So this is lethal on board. Alright, and it's going to be legitimate lethal. Let's go. The triple Markov Waltzer coming in hot. Let's go. Markov Waltzer number 2. Finding that lethal, we are going to be 4-1 now, heading into Game 6. Alright, Game 6 on the play. Turn 1, Voldaren Epicure. Turn 2, Voltaic Visionary or Panic Bystander. And a great removal spell. Our cheap little extra damage spell. Very good stuff here. Super into the hand. Our opponent's on blue with a turn 1 Lantern Bearer. Phenomenal card. Sending the Epicure off for the trade. No blocks. Just drop the Voltaic Visionary. I don't think I'm going to want to be attacking in with it. I'm also not super confident I want to try to tap it next turn, because if I hit any of my 4 drops or 5 drops, I'll be super unhappy with that, but there's only 6 of them in the deck. 6 out of 32. 6 out of 32 chance of hitting a card that I can't cast with Visionary. I guess if I hit a 3-drop, I also can't. At this point, 2 lands, there's 15 lands left in these 31 cards. We're at like a coin flip to hit a land, which means we're at a pretty high chance of hitting a land or a 1 or 2 drop, and we need to dig for lands. So let's just shoot ourselves in the face to try to hit land for turn. It's not land for turn, but it can draw us a card, and it can flip the Voltaic Visionary, so we'll do that. This could hit land for turn. If it doesn't, we can still play Traveling Minister. It does hit our land for turn. Beautiful. There's our turn 3 land. And I guess I can send an Epicure. Trading into Lantern Bearer or Perish Blade Trainee is fine. Suppose I might as well drop the Panicked Bystander first, so if it does trade, I gain a life. Alright, we'll trade into the Lantern Bearer, which means they're probably going to throw the Lantern's Lift onto something later, give it +1/+1 in flying, maybe even the Perish Blade Trainee. Kindly Ancestor is the play for turn. Very nice lifelinking blocker. That's a Spirit though, which means Rending Flame will deal extra damage to them. If they try to double block and kill Berserker, I could Rending Flame. I could also drop Alluring Suitor and attack with both, and then I have the mana up for the +1/+0 ability. Means this attacks as a 5/3, this attacks as a 3/2. We can make sure we're trading no matter where. Plus the Alluring Suitor will be flipped, which is great. Yeah. This seems reasonable. I don't get to buff both of them, but I get to buff whichever one needs to be buffed. Such as, like, yeah, if they block a 2/2 with a 2/3, then I buff the 2/2. We gain 1 life and pass the turn. So if they blocked the 4-3 with a 2-3 and a 1-2, they'd be blocking with 5 toughness, so I couldn't kill both of those unless I buffed the Volt Charged Berserker with the Deadly Dancer, so kind of where I was going with the we can buff whichever one needs to get buffed off the Deadly Dancer flip. So they are definitely loading up on some extra value for later with Lantern's Lift and Kindly Ancestor in their grave. You want to combat trick my Deadly Dancer, you got it, because you could just do that on blocks. Serpentine Ambush, fair enough, means they don't play any more creatures this turn. I get to keep slamming them in the face with a 4-3, which is still a human, to draw me a card off of Resistance Squad, hoping to hit land 4. We do hit land 4, and it's a white source, which means I get to run out the Traveling Minister in the same turn. Very mana efficient. Super good stuff there. Stitched Assistant, potentially sack the trainees, scrying and drawing, trying to find their 4th land. Scry to the bottom, draw a card. They do find land number 4, just an island here. Markov Waltzer is beautiful. Come on out, my friend. Let's just get all that damage in here. Traveling Minister, Markov Waltzer, those two cards stack together really well, being able to stack up the damage however we want it. So double Traveling Minister, triple Markov Waltzer has been so great for this deck. And our opponent is going to scoop them up there. They're still a little bit stuck on mana. And not going to be able to play out enough blockers to survive that initial onslaught. So we are now 5-1 in the money yet again. We'll be leaving this event with more gems than it took to enter it, leaving with at least 1,600 gems in 4 packs. Let's see if we can't keep it going as we head into round number 7. Alright, here we are for game 7. Super reasonable hand. We'll just roll out some Blood Petal Celebrants and see where things go from there, depending on what we draw. Playing against another blue deck. Nothing on turn 2 for them. Blue-red with a turn 3 Dream Shacklegeist. Very, very strong rare. Can tap a creature or lock a creature down from untapping every single turn. If I drop a Nurturing Presence, then I have a 1/1 flyer and they can't really ever attack me with that, but I kind of want them to maybe attack me with it so I can Fierce Retribution it. It's probably a little greedy to try to immediately Fierce Retribution it instead of playing something, but I could do something where I like play one of my 2-drop creatures this turn, and then next turn I play a 2-drop and hold up Fierce Retribution. So I think that'll be the line. We'll play another Blood Petal Celebrant. Next turn, I get to run out a Panicked Bystander and hold up Fierce Retribution. So it doesn't look as obvious that I'm just holding something up. Or I could just slam down a Markov Waltzer, but I do think I want to play around them just syncopating for 2 this turn, which I can do by playing a 2-drop. Yep, that's a counterspell of some kind. Well, that's an instant speed spell of some kind. They are thinking. Snitching Arena, back at it again. Thirst for Discovery. So they do have an instant speed card draw spell at least. They probably have that and a counter spell, which means our Retribution's about to get countered, but it is what it is. That would soak up some of their mana so that they can't play any more creatures this turn. At least not easily, and they won't be able to hold up the counter spell for later. Ooh, pre-combat Alluring Suitor. They still attack, and they're not attacking 2 creatures, which means Alluring Suitor doesn't trigger, and they don't have the mana up to counter Fierce Retribution. They do have the mana up to put their Dream Shacklegeist back into their hand, but they'll have to replay it. It's going to cost them quite a bit of mana. I think we want to be mana efficient here and just waltz on in. Waltz on in for some damage. Buff both the ground troops, so all they can do is trade on the ground with Alluring Suitor. They have no profitable blocks. They are going to trade on the ground, though. Potentially. They're thinking it through. Alright, they are going to trade on the ground. They're down to 12. We gain a life. They get to play Dream Shacklegeist pre-combat, keep a Blood Petal Celebrant tapped down, but then they only have 2 mana left to play around with. And we get to Impulse and try to draw into some more threats to keep the pressure on them. They're going to go for Blood Petal Celebrants instead of the Dream Shacklegeists, fair enough. Waltzer buffs both Celebrants up to being 3 power, so if I give each of them +1, then they'll be able to attack in here. So I'm going to give one of the Celebrants +1 from Ancestral Anger, and the other one, I can just put 2 Markov Waltzers onto it if I draw into that. Okay. So that works. First Markov Waltzer will go 1 on this Celebrant, 1 on the other. And the other one will go 1 on this Celebrant and 1 on a Waltzer. And I can attack with everybody, and they have no good blocks. I hit them for 11, or they chump block 4 damage here. Multiple Markov Waltzers is absurd. It's like better than in most board states, better than like a 4 mana 3/3 flyer with haste. Because it's getting so much extra damage and that just wouldn't be happening otherwise. If it weren't for like these Markov Waltzers, we'd be getting 0 damage in on the ground here. So if these were just 3/3's haste, then this attack would be 6 damage if they were just 4 mana 3/3 flying haste. But the fact that we spread their extra 2 power wherever we want, they're actually getting, instead of just hitting for 6 total, they're finding an extra like 4 damage that we wouldn't have had otherwise, because the 2/2/1s are able to get in by getting buffed up as well. So such incredible stuff from the Markov Waltzers. That's like my new favorite card in this format. I don't think I ever really drafted Boros in this format until this latest return to the set, this latest flashback draft time. But now I've drafted Boros twice, and it's been phenomenal each time. The Markov Waltzer being a premium card. Such great just combat math shenanigans. We're 6-1 now. We're heading into the final boss with a chance at getting a 7-win run today. Here we are for round 8, which is what may be the final boss. This hand looks like it is capable of doing some nonsense. We have a creature to play turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, and turn 4, and they're all really strong. It involves flipping Alluring Suitor on turn 3, potentially. Okay, not if they Flame Blast Bolt the Minister. But if we were like goldfishing here, if our opponent just did not have any interaction, this hand would be a really quick path to victory, but it's still quite a strong hand, even against that Flame Blast Bolt. Send in the Celebrant here. And drop an Alluring Suitor. We'll drop a Markov Waltzer next turn, again holding onto the Resistance Squad until we have nothing else to cast, so we get as much time as possible to draw into a human for it. So Voldaren Epic here from our opponent. Still not good enough blockers for the Blood Petal Celebrant. And another blood token from our opponent with their Blood Fountain, which also gives them some great graveyard recursion for the future. Alright, so they could double block the Alluring Suitor to kill it. Not a massive fan of that, but I don't really have a play around that. So let's just drop Markov Waltzer. And send in 2 creatures to flip the Alluring Suitor. What 2 creatures do I send in? We send in Suitor and Blood Petal Celebrant. That'll be more damage than sending in the Waltzer in the sky, so buff those 2. Those will be the 2 attacking creatures. Better to flip the Suitor than get 1 extra point in by attacking with Markov Waltzer. And yeah, they can double block and kill Deadly Dancer, but we get to trample over for a good amount of damage. Hit for a bunch with the Blood Petal Celebrant as well. But we are just about out of cards now. Resistance Squad doesn't do much by itself, so our opponent could certainly recover from this with the amount of card advantage they potentially have. Blood tokens to cycle into whatever they need. Blood Fountain to pick up 2 more creatures. But we do start the game with our opponent down to 11. There's a Blood-Crazed Socialite. Hits like a truck. Doesn't block particularly well, though, so I'm not too worried about that. Unfortunately, we did not draw a human, but we do still kind of need to just play Resistance Squad to keep the pressure up. Our opponent is down to 6 life now. They'll play a Reckless Impulse, finding a Voldaren Arsonist, Volatile Arsonist, sorry. A very powerful card they can cast next turn that's going to hit the board, blow up our 2/1, and shoot us in the face for 1. That's going to be really strong in the future if they can make it to next turn, which depends on what we draw here. And depends on what's in their hand. If they attack like this, they have something in hand, because otherwise they're quite dead on board. Vampire's Vengeance, 2 to all non-vampires, so they're ready to take 5 damage on the board and go to 1 here. They're going to drop Volatile Arsonist next turn to kill Blood Petal Celebrant, but then they're dead in the sky to Markov Waltzer if that's their play, so... Feels solid. Feels like we'll be fine here. And I do get a blood token once they kill the Blood Petal Celebrant, so I can cycle away this mountain, which will be quite helpful. Yeah, I mean, they would need to have like a 1-mana flyer or reach creature, or they'll still just be dead. If they slam down the Arsonist, kill the Celebrant, because the Arsonist, it's not going to be nighttime, so the Arsonist can't kill the flyer. I guess even if it was nighttime, it's only 2 damage still against the 3 toughness creature. Markov Waltzer's big booty coming in hot. Legs for days. Alright, dig for some outs with their blood tokens. Find another land. There's the Abrade for the Waltzer, but then they don't have the mana up to play any more blockers, so they die to our wide board state. So Abrade to kill the Waltzer, send a message, and then scoop them up. That is going to be a victory for us. That is going to be a 7-win run. 7-1 today. Really, really great run from this deck. I think the deck was really, really strong. Again, our draft pod was kind of wild. A lot of powerful cards rolling around in a lot of different colors. We certainly could have been a blue-white Disturb deck. Could have been some other colors. But I'm perfectly happy with where we ended up here with a really aggressive Boros deck with 3 Markov Waltzer. Absolute MVP yet again, just like it was in our last Boros deck. Stacking that up, finding the damage wherever you need. When our opponents drop down their 4/4 menace blockers, the fact that we could have 2 Markov Waltzers on the board, or a Markov Waltzer and a Traveling Minister, to just be like, okay, nice 4/4 blocker, I'll just have Markov Waltzer give my Celebrant +1/+0, and Traveling Minister give the Celebrant +1/+0. That way it still gets in for damage because it's attacking as a 4/1 first striker against your 4/4 blockers. The Markov Waltzers, the Traveling Ministers, absolutely incredible here at making sure, as I said before, that we are just constantly attacking, even when our opponent is playing those larger blockers that would normally help them stabilize. So, beautiful stuff from the deck all around. Some of the weakest stuff was mainly just like the Ancestral Angers. If we had a few more great cheap removal spells, if we replaced the 2 of these with Flame Blessed Bolts, one of them with a Rending Flame, I think deck would be like close to perfect. Resistance Squad wasn't great either. We don't have a super high human count, so I guess like that could get swapped out for maybe another Voltaic Visionary or another Blood Petal Celebrant, something like that. It was quite strong. Certainly far from perfect. We have several cards that we could swap out for slightly stronger cards, or if we were lucky and opened up an on-color rare or mythic anywhere, get a bomb rare in here, and that upgrades the deck quite a bit, but still, commons and uncommons, just aggressive nonsense, can win you some games. 7-1 for today's Innistrad Crimson Vow Premier Draft. But that is going to end today's video. As always, I'd like to thank my patrons very much for supporting this channel, as well as you for watching the videos. If you enjoy these videos and you'd like to see more, you can always like, comment, and subscribe to tell the YouTube algorithm to send you more in your recommended feed. If you'd like to hang out with me live, you can check out the Twitch channel in the link in the description below. And if you'd like to support the channel directly, you can check out the Patreon link in the description below. Other than that, as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon for some more Magic Arena.